Are you curious about digital marketing strategies, or would you like to learn how you could generate more leads from your website? I'm joined by Fabio Zammit, a seasoned software engineer and entrepreneur who's here to share actionable website tips to help you do exactly that in this episode of Architecture Business Club, the weekly podcast for solo and small firm architecture practice owners just like you who want to build a profitable future-proof architecture business that fits around their life. I'm John Clayton, your host. If you're a small practice leader or sole practitioner in architecture, struggling to find clarity or reach your goals, consider working with me. I offer personalised one-to-one support through coaching, consulting and mentoring. This tailored approach helps you navigate your unique path to success. Whether it's growing your practice, working fewer hours or building your team, I've got you covered. Just click the link in the show notes to book a call with me to discuss your options, or email John, that's Jon, at architecturebusinessclub.com for more information. Now let's discuss how you can generate more leads from your website. Fabio Zammit is a seasoned software engineer with over 2 decades of experience, including stints at industry giants like HSBC and AOL in London. His journey led him to establish Root Codex, an agency designed to fill the gaps he identified in the tech industry. Root Codex specialises in seamlessly integrating top-tier software engineers into your existing tech teams, eliminating the challenges of freelance management and hiring. This approach ensures that businesses can scale up their tech capabilities effortlessly. Fabio, welcome to Architecture Business Club.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you here. Fabio, tell me about your house building projects. I know that you've been building your own home over the last few years. Can you tell me about how it's been going so far and what stage you're at?
Sure. I think it's an enlightening experience because it really gets to appreciate your side of the fence. And yes, it's been 2 years, so obviously trying to get the whole planning permission. And for someone myself, it's a new experience. Unlike yourselves, we have so much experience with building different dwellings. It's been interesting. Obviously, sometimes it has ups and downs. But it's so great to see the whole creation come to life. And you get to learn the different technicalities and where you might not understand in certain things beforehand. Now you get to learn a bit more about the ins and outs. So super interesting. And to be honest with you, it's been one of my life dreams to build a house, especially now that I have a family. So it's coming to shape. And hopefully, within the next few months, it will be complete. So yeah, looking forward to that.
Oh, how exciting. Fabio, has there been any particular challenges along the way, or have there been any sort of particular surprises that was unexpected about the process of building a house?
It's an old house, and the ins and outs of that, and how to handle the different aspects of the stone. And here in Malta, where I'm based, there's a lot of historic and certain aspects dates to around 50 to 100 years. So it's quite a challenge. And you obviously want to preserve the whole historic aspect, but at the same time, obviously you want to make it a home. So finding a balance, I think, is one of the most challenging, especially where I am based is just one of those modern builds, which has been 10 years max. So completely different scenario.
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge working with older buildings. I've worked on a few over the years myself, and I'm connected with a lot of other people in architecture that specialise in heritage buildings and listed buildings in the UK. And it certainly does throw up a few extra challenges, but it'll be worth it, I'm sure. And I bet you can't wait to get in there.
I hope so. I hope it will work.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure it will. So, Fabio, we're going to talk about digital marketing today so that architects can generate more leads from their online presence, specifically their website. So that's the main thing that we're going to be talking about today. How important is the design and layout of an architecture practice's website?
Okay. What's interesting is that even though I come from the software world, as in we share something in common, which ultimately we're delivering a service to the end customer. And believe it or not, even though even if you have an office, you're still operating the same way how any retail shop works, where you have a shop and there's also the presence. So someone walks in and obviously gets glances at the different products. It's the same thing for us, where someone visits your website and someone starts to get an idea of yourself, what the type of services you offer, the quality. And they start, and you have literally around 5 seconds to convince someone about your offering. So to answer your question, the user friendliness is very, very key. And it's not only for your customers, but it's also for yourself. Because we'll be chatting further in the podcast about Google, how Google gives a lot of prominence to user friendliness. So it's a win-win for everyone. And the more friendly the site is, the more obviously you have a chance for a user to actually engage and keep on reading. Ultimately, by just putting a bunch of text and random images, people are just going to get bored and leave. And just to iterate, it takes 5 seconds to convince someone to keep on reading.
Geez, so we really don't have much time to grab people's attention and to keep them on our site. Yeah, so that first impression that we make is really important.
As always, yes. And also nowadays, as you know well enough, with the attention span being so short with all the different social media platforms, even more we need to be on top of our game. So, and plus, the world has become very competitive on all fronts, in my opinion. So,
yeah, I agree with that for sure. One of the things that a lot of architects like to do is they like to showcase their work, and they're very proud of the design work. I was wondering if there's any best practices for showcasing case studies on their website.
Yes. So the good thing is I've worked with clients which are in your industry back in the day. So I really get to understand what people are after. And again, from a best practice perspective, it's all about visual, as in visual really sells. So if you have any even videos of the different 3D arts, so if it's an interior design showcasing the 3D model, or even obviously really nice images, I really highly suggest that you publish them more. Obviously, it needs to be done in a very optimized fashion, otherwise the site gets slow, but that is for another question maybe. But ultimately, what you really want to go after is very short, quick, catchy text. You don't want really too long format. Obviously, you need to explain what the project is about, but imagery and video is what's going to push most. Because people like something very short. Nowadays it's all about YouTube Shorts. So anything that is nice, short and concise and really attractive imagery. So something I recommend is hiring a photographer maybe to go take a few shots of a build, or whether it's the interior, whether it's the exterior. All of these are super important. And showcasing all of this information is very key. Obviously, location. Ultimately, you want to make it even more relevant to the user. So there's a lot of psychology to it. People think that building a website is all about the technical side of things, but there's a lot of the marketing side where you have to think about the psychology. What is the end user looking for? So the end user ultimately is looking for what is relevant to them. So obviously variety helps, so variety of projects. If you're starting out, obviously you put whatever you have. But obviously if you're an established business, try to put as many case studies as you can. And to summarize, focus on video, imagery, and really concise and compelling text.
Great. Okay. So we can use a mixture of video, images, and concise and clear text to support that content. The other thing I want to pick up on there, you mentioned about the word of, you mentioned about relevancy.
Yes, very true.
So if we're trying to attract a certain type of customer, we want to make sure that those case studies are the ones that we're showcasing are relevant for that. I remember talking to a few years ago, talking to my own web developer, and one of the things that she talked about was having the website future focused, so that it was kind of like we were trying to attract those future clients that we were looking for. So if it was like a certain niche or a certain type of customer, whether it was somebody doing a home renovation or a commercial client, like if we're trying to attract somebody building a new home, and our case studies were like commercial projects, we're going to be attracting the wrong clients. So
yes.
I think that's quite important to reiterate, that the relevancy as well of.
Spot on. Especially if you're trying to attract, for example, investors in the whole commercial space. Yes, it's important relevance, because that is something I've seen a lot over the years, where people just put content for the sake of content, but who is your user? Who are you trying to engage with? Who are you trying to attract? And putting the relevant case studies helps a lot. So yes, spot on. That is a perfect example.
Yeah. So you mentioned there about thinking about the user, and that is the thing, isn't it? It's thinking about, like, this website isn't for our peers. It should be for our customers, or our prospective customers that we're trying to attract. And I think having that front of mind when you are thinking about the design of your website and working with a developer, that is really important, to have your customers front of mind. You've almost got to kind of put yourself in their shoes, haven't you?
Yes, very true. In fact, the thing is, sometimes we get lost into all the bells and whistles, like even a lot of developers tend to say, look, there's this technology, stick to the best things, which is the basics. The basics are, who is my customer, who he or she or they, who do they want, what do they want to see, and provide content that is relevant to the audience. It's like a TV advert. Again, I'm not a marketing expert, but ultimately, if our website functions exactly in the same manner, who are we targeting in terms of the audience? And then the technicalities are secondary. Of course, they're important, but relevance is key, for sure.
Got it. So one of the other things I believe is very important is social proof. So things like testimonials. So when it comes to using testimonials and putting them on our website, is there any best practices around that? I mean, should we have like a testimonials page, or should they be scattered across the site? What are your thoughts on how we use testimonials on our website?
Good question. So ultimately, nowadays, look, if you're catering for B2B, so business to business, or B2C, so business to customer, you always need testimonials. Now, from business to customer, people tend to use a lot of Trustpilot, and depending on the vertical. However, if you're operating in the B2B or B2C, which is more of a service oriented in our case, always have testimonials on the homepage. I wouldn't have a dedicated page unless you have hundreds of testimonials. But again, this is about less is more. So select your 10 best testimonials. And as someone is scrolling down, so imagine your homepage, you're visualizing your amazing projects, and then a small section about the business, about what you're offering. And as you're kind of selling them, selling not the best word maybe, as you're passing on a message about how great you are, that isn't then where you want to have your social proof. Which is testimonials, and saying, listen, hey, I've worked with John. John is an amazing guy, and he has delivered X, Y, and Z. And then it would be nice to have a name and also a title if it's B2B. And the reason why having a name is because obviously it creates a certain level of trust that this is not just some random testimonial. Obviously, try to steer away from using artificial intelligence to create testimonials, because certain things get picked up. So, and if possible, try and add a little photo if the person actually gives you consent. Because again, the more authentic things are, the more the user will pick up on that, and the more you create trust, and the more they will obviously trust your service and be keen to reach out. So yes. And another thing I would add on with testimonials, and this is mainly for B2B. If you've worked with certain contractors or certain, even it could be even partners or certain companies, or from a commercial perspective, which are renowned within your industry, I suggest putting their different logos, because that helps it helps benefit both brands. So if I put that I've worked with HSBC, it's probably their brand, and obviously it gives me more credit because I've worked with such a large brand. Same thing same thing for yourself. But to go back to your question, yes, testimonials are key. Ultimately, I can say I have the most amazing services, but social proof nowadays is super Something else I want to touch base on is Google My Business. So Google My Business essentially is, if you have an office, it does not have, it can be a one desk, it could be anything. You essentially go on Google Maps, and on Google Maps, you can add your business to the map itself. Then there's a whole verification process. So there's a small process which is not technical. It's super straightforward. And your clients will have the option to add reviews on Google. So first of all, you benefit that your business will start showing up on search results, obviously not just your website. You would have the name of your business. You can add your contact details, whether you're open on certain days, your opening hours. So it kind of adds a certain element of a social proof. But also people can actually add reviews on Google Reviews. And that is, obviously it helps because people can upload images. So even if you maybe don't want to have testimonials on your website, you can benefit by using Google My Business. And it's completely free.
I'm a big fan of Google My Business. I think the fact that it's something that's free and it's baked into Google, it's a Google product. It's particularly good if you're a local service business. It's particularly good for local search. And if you're listening to this episode and you want to learn more about Google My Business specifically, skip back and listen to the recent episode that we've done with Melanie Boylan, which is all about Google My Business profiles. Go and check that out. Definitely worth a listen. Okay, so another thing, Fabio, I wanted to talk about was search engine optimization, or otherwise known as SEO. So people will have certainly heard that acronym before if they've ever started, if they've got a website or considering getting a new website. Could you just explain, like, what is SEO and what are the key things that we need to know about it?
Cool. So search engine optimization is a whole world of its own, where essentially you are optimizing your website in order to show up on Google search results. And of course, the more work and the more your site is optimized, and I'll explain two key things shortly, the higher you go up in the rankings. Now, just to be clear, the rankings are based on a particular search term. So I might search for interior designer London. When I type interior designer London, you will show up on that particular keyword. Now, obviously, it's a bit more complex. So you need to optimize with different keywords, and there's lots more to behind the science. However, the key things that I suggest anyone doing are two things. One is creating a journal or it's a blog on your website where you can actually start creating content. And this content is, for example, if you get some form of awards, if you create a new project. So your case studies can be merged as a journal. And the more content you post, the more Google obviously will promote. Again, I'm oversimplifying it, but it's just to explain the whole concept here. But the idea is that Google wants websites to be user-friendly. So we'll go back to the initial question, because ultimately Google is rendering a service to the end user. So let's think about myself, or I'm searching for interior designer London, or architect in London, or architect in Newcastle, so that we don't offend anyone from the north. So basically what I'm saying is that Google has my best interest. So they want that websites which I get to view are as user-friendly as possible and load very fast. So because the more Google serves those type of results, the more Google is, as I'm doing a great service for myself where I want to find something and I get to find one, the most relevant, and two, sites which are appealing and ultimately answer the questions I'm looking for, or for a service, for a product. So again, user-friendliness and speed are two key things. There are also metrics out there to test your site speed using Page Speed Insights. It's a free tool. You can go ahead, put in your domain there, and it checks the speed for you. And you can discuss that with your developer. So those are two key things. And then the other aspect is content. So the content is, Google will always want to see fresh content. And the more fresh content you have, the more it promotes. Again, I highly discourage you using these generators. So try use content which is obviously genuine content and not just some random content. And obviously creating content around the keywords you want to target is super important. So if you want to target, again, interior designer in Newcastle, or architect in Newcastle, again, those are the type of keywords you need to include in your content. Overdoing it in terms of repeating your keyword is not suggested. Again, I'm obviously summarizing things, but those are the first things that we would do what we call on the site. The last thing that is super important is our articles on third-party websites. So what I mean is this, that ultimately the way Google operates is that the more they find the link to my website on different authority websites. So by authority, I mean so websites like the Times or any high authority websites you could think of, like for example, The Guardian. If you had to have your link or a PR article on one of these different websites, the higher Google will push your website. Ultimately, links are seen as referrals. So if I have a link on John's website, John is referring me in some shape or form. So the more you get these links from these different media houses, the better. So the way I would approach it is to do a PR exercise, and basically you might have an award, or you might have really be happy about a particular project. Go all out on it, and obviously make sure they links to your website. So yes, of course, it's there's a much more to it, but those are the very, very basics about search engine optimization. So yeah.
I love that. So you've mentioned there's a few things that are on-site SEO, and then you've also mentioned about the idea of writing content or be it a press release that gets published on someone else's website. If you're lucky enough to get some PR in somewhere like The Guardian or The Times or the BBC, if those are what are deemed as websites that have a high authority, so that they are good quality sites, they're reputable, that is, if we get a link from those sites back to our site, that is going to help us to get our own websites more visible in search engines like Google. And that's something that people call that is link building. If anybody ever uses that terminology around link building, that's this exercise of going out and creating content or contributing content to add links from other websites back to your own website to help build up its SEO authority.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'll just add a very quick disclaimer. Just be aware of these people that sell these quick link building things. SEO is it's a marathon. It's not sort of a race. So my suggestion, SEO is a long-term thing, and ultimately you need patience and you need to invest in it over the long term. So it's easy to say, listen, something might take 2 to 6 months to see certain efforts, but try to steer away from those people that say, yeah, we can sell you these links, because you'll be doing yourself a disservice. So be careful.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's no quick wins with any of this. If something sounds too good to be true, it usually is. Yeah, if you get one of those like spammy messages on Instagram saying that they're going to give you 1,000 new links to your website and overnight, then yes, proceed with extreme caution.
Exactly.
Cool. There's a couple of other things I wanted to just touch upon. So just on the SEO, if we are targeting a particular keyword, how specific or generic should we be? So for instance, you could say, well, I'm an architect and I'm in London, so the keyword is going to be Architect London. Or you could go very granular and it could be, well, actually, I am an architect in London, but I want to target ideally a particular area of London, I don't know, Islington, and I want to target people that are doing loft conversions. So are there any pros and cons to how wide or how niche we go with our keywords? So I'm thinking if we were, for example, like writing a blog article for our website, is it wise to go wide, or should we be thinking about going more niche with a longer keyword? Remember, don't forget to download the Architecture Business Blueprint, the step-by-step formula to freedom for architects, architectural technologists and architectural designers. You can grab the blueprint without any charge at architecturebusinessclub.com/blueprint. And if you're enjoying this episode, then please leave a 5-star review or rating wherever you listen to podcasts. Now back to the show.
So we call those long-tail keywords. So long-tail keywords is loft conversions in is LinkedIn, rather than is LinkedIn loft renovation, for example. So long tail, what it means is literally the longer the phrase that a person is searching, it's considered as long tail. So in this particular case, to answer your question, I would go for a long tail, because unless your site is really big and you've been doing a lot of SEO efforts, I would stay away from the shorter phrases, like, for example, Architecture London or Architects London, because that is that's quite difficult. Ultimately, as in, if you have to hire someone who does SEO, they will guide you and will tell you also how many searches there are for a particular keyword. So it's important that you don't just randomly target a keyword. It's important to have this research. But to answer your question, especially for someone that wants to do local SEO, where local SEO is, let's say you're based in London and you want to target Islington, you want to target Reading, you want to target Wimbledon. In that case, yes, it's very important to use these long tail. But again, it's like anything else. Don't make changes without having the data. So there are tools out there, like, again, they're slightly on the expensive side, which like SEMrush or Ahrefs. But again, these tools would tell you, listen, how much volume does each keyword have? So volume is another word for how many searches does a keyword get. And then you act based on the data rather than how the wind is blowing today, if that makes sense.
Got it. Just wanted to ask a quick follow-up question, Fabio. There's a couple of times that you've mentioned about how important site speed is. Yeah. Are there any best practices around that to ensure that we do have a fast-loading website? Are there any sort of quick tips you could give us on that?
Of course. So again, one is images need to be as small as possible. So there are tools out there. You just will put Google search there where you can upload an image and it resizes. If you're using WordPress, there are so many plugins out there. Two I recommend, and we have no partnership or affiliation, just FYI, is one is Imagify and WP Rocket. There are two plugins which are great. Again, they don't really cost much and they were really happy with site speed. But again, these are just kind of, it's like you have a hole into the ceiling and you're patching it with tape. So there are tools which should be added on a good foundation. So it's always good that the developer, your web developer, does a good job with the website in terms of the build, in terms of how certain things. So the build is super important. But then secondly, from a content perspective, I would use a plugin like Imagify, if it's WordPress, of course, which compresses any image that you upload. So super key. And for example, videos, I would try use YouTube, where you can upload a video and then embed the video on your website. These little tricks help a lot.
That's brilliant. Thank you for sharing those. So Fabio, if we want to move people along from just scrolling on our website, so we've captured their attention, they're scrolling on the website, how do we get them to then take the next step with us to move beyond just scrolling?
Cool. So the key thing that I've seen as an over time is people have a really great website, but then it's very hard for the user to find how to contact the person or the company. So one thing I highly recommend is to add what we call CTAs. So CTAs is just a fancy word for a call to action. So essentially it's a button, which you click on the button and an action is carried out. So I would have, as in, if you think about your website, where on top you have your great logo, you have the menu, one in the middle. Again, the positions may vary, but on the top right, and that is psychologically one of the areas that people tend to look at, is you have a contact button. And when you click on that button, it will take you either to a contact form, or it might take you to an email. Ideally, a contact form, as in, because again, so a form is where someone can actually enter the details and they can get back to you. Keep the form as concise as possible. The less fields, the better. Ultimately here, it's about capturing the lead. And another thing I would add is that when someone is scrolling, you want to add call to actions under every bit of content. So you remind the user, hey, if this is something that you like, get in touch. We're happy to help you out. And obviously by that, you're encouraging the user to show, listen, we want to handhold you, and so that we want to help you out. You know what I mean? So again, so that constant reminder of how to contact the company, the business, the individual, is super important. And contact details in the footer. That is something which I think is super key. Obviously, if you have a company where you might have people that walk in, it's important to maybe have a Google Maps to show the exact location, and people can actually open the link when they're on their phone. So another key thing about all what we've discussed is think about mobile first. So Google prioritizes mobile. So whenever you're making these changes, please always check your phone. So what I mean is open the website on your phone, go through it on your phone. If it looks good on your phone, that's a great start. Of course, it needs to look good even on a desktop machine, but your phone is super key. Google thinks about mobile. Also, think about where the world is heading. So think about your user, which is mobile. Yeah.
I love that. So just to reiterate, the calls to action, we need some very clear calls to action across our site. You've recommended that we have something in the top right of our navigation bar that we get on the website across the site. This just makes it really easy so that if people are reading, if they're scrolling at any point, they can very quickly and easily hit that button and they can get to a contact form. And if we make the contact form fairly simple without too many fields, then we're going to presume we're making it easier so that we're going to capture more people with that form. And if you have a longer form with a lot more questions, it's going to filter more people out. So depending on how many people you're looking to capture, to get in touch, and how much you want to filter that, you can either have a very short form to get more volume, or if you are being quite particular, if you're fortunate enough to be very busy already and you're looking to filter things out, there is the option of expanding it and having a longer form on that.
So I would just 3 things that I suggest is the call to action. Always have a color which contrasts very well with the background. So if you have a white background and your brand colors are on the green, have it a nice dark green. So the contrast is super important. And the text within the call to action needs to be short. Having something with get in touch with Fabio, because again, keep it short, get in touch. And using words like get or so something which is like a verb which shows an action helps. And the last thing I wanted to add is whenever you receive a statistic I saw recently, the quicker you answer a lead that you get from your website, the higher chance you get for closing that lead. There was a statistic which was quite phenomenal that maybe if you leave the lead for more than 24 hours, practically your chances are slimmer in closing that lead. So just a small business tip, which, like that.
Brilliant. Those are really helpful. Just to recap again on the calls to action, you also mentioned about making sure we include contact information in the footer. Yeah. So reiterate that we include that information in there, whatever the preferred contact method is, email, phone number, address, whatever, make sure that's in the footer. So Fabio, one of the things you mentioned there is about a mobile first approach. I'm aware of having been involved in several websites that I've had of my own over the years, and working with a developer was about creating a responsive website so that it displayed well and looked good on any device. So whether it was an iPad, a mobile phone, a laptop, and there's quite an art to that. It can be quite a challenge because sometimes you think, oh, well, this looks great. This image, this banner looks fantastic on the laptop. And then you'd go on the mobile view and it'd be like, oh, right, okay, that doesn't quite work. So there could be a bit of experimentation. So I think that for any listeners that are looking at creating a website or working with a developer, it is something to be mindful that it is very important that there is a mobile first approach, that it looks good on mobile, and it ideally it look good on every type of device. And that might mean that you need to have some flexibility in your choices of images and your positioning of text, because what looks good on one screen doesn't necessarily look right when you look at it on a smaller size screen.
Yes, and ultimately it's the job of the UX designer and the developer to help you with these different things. So, because it's quite technical. So, yeah.
Very important. How can we enhance our credibility online? Do you have any recommendations around that?
Sure. So, again, from a credibility perspective, it's key to actually, obviously, we mentioned testimonials. That is the first thing. However, you can also go the next step. So, again, you had your previous guest that mentioned Google My Business, and I would kind of give other tips apart from that. So Google My Business is I would suggest that. And the key difference between that versus testimonials on your website is that no one can come up to you and say, listen, hey, these are testimonials that someone just wrote themselves. So, okay, there's always a way around everything, but GMB, so Google My Business, is highly recommended. Now, the next step I would take is, if you look around your industry and you know of certain different bodies, which are quite organizations, which are even non-profit, which are quite important, and maybe they partner up with different companies and they might want to list you. That is something, that we have done in the past. So we've looked at different suppliers or other companies we partner up with, or other websites which are really sort of have a really high authority within our industry, and we'll go up to them and they might have a section where they recommend different companies or businesses. I suggest you get yourself listed, even if it costs something small. Again, it's worth it, because ultimately even your name will, whenever someone types your name in Google, it's the over the parent body will show. So it's like, for example, the BBC is recommending Fabio, to work with them. Again, maybe it's not the best example, but I'm sure that gives an idea. So so that's something that I recommend, because generally it's free and can be very, very effective. And also, it also gives you the option of having your link on a third-party website, which, as we recommend before in SEO terms, so it's key. So that is my recommendation.
Brilliant. I love those. Can you share a few strategies to drive traffic to our website?
So with regards to that, I would really look into what we call PPC. So PPC stands for paid per click campaigns. Essentially, again, now this is the part where you need to see what type of customer you're targeting. Again, always think about the user and your audience. So essentially all it is, whenever you're going on Facebook, you go on LinkedIn and those ads pop up and they say promoted or sponsored. That is what PPC is. Essentially you pay per click. So you put your ads, you put your copy, you put your text, and each time someone clicks, you get to see, they get to link to wherever you want to go. In this case, I suggest your website. So PPC campaigns is a quicker way. It's in order to attract leads, because SEO is a long-term journey. Where PPC, if you had to get an expert, you could say within a few weeks you could get something up and running. Again, and it's very highly targeted. Something I always recommend is always choose the platform which makes more sense to you. So if you're appealing to B2C, so business to consumer, I suggest maybe more the Facebook or the Instagram world. If you're going down the B2B, then maybe more LinkedIn. LinkedIn tends to be a bit more expensive. Of course, there's Google. How could I forget about Google? And there are, of course, other platforms which are outside the social media platforms. Again, something which, if you get in touch with a paid media expert, they can obviously help you out. That is one of the ways. Another thing I highly recommend is obviously podcasts. Again, a great job that you've done, John. So this could be, obviously it's a lot of work, and like I said, John, as I've mentioned earlier, you've put in a lot of effort. So this is again a long-term gain, but can really pay dividends. Again, doing YouTube videos is also an interesting thing, but again, it's a long-term gain. So if you want the short-term gains, I would, again, short-term gains is still a lot of work, but I would go down the paid media. If you want the long-term, I would say SEO, videos on different platforms. And if you're saying, hey, what videos can I put? It's ultimately people want to get into, I wouldn't say into personal lives, but the more you post about things which relate and really resonate with someone's content, the more sort of people who actually subscribe. As in, I had subscribed to an interior designer, which was fantastic. It was doing an amazing job, and I'm a tech person. So I might not be the relevant customer, but at the same time, it goes to show that the stuff works. But sometimes think it takes effort, but they pay off in the end. So, and another thing, how could I forget, is LinkedIn. So if you're targeting a lot of B2B space, I would suggest LinkedIn. So posting on LinkedIn about your content. Again, John, you know this very well. But again, and LinkedIn does not have to be just business to business in your case, because if you're attracting the C-level or management who, for example, like myself, who are building a new house, or maybe someone who's investing in commercial real estate, it could be a great opportunity. So again, but the most important is choose the right channel. So by channel, what I mean is LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, etc., based on your target audience. Sorry.
I love that. So choose the platform, choose the right platform for the right audience, depending on who you're targeting, and also choose the right, I suppose, the right tactic, the right tactic for your marketing efforts, depending on your timeline as well, because you mentioned there that some of those tactics are long-term strategies and others are things that can give you a faster return on your investment. So something like pay-per-click, you mentioned, if you get that set up right and you get some help with that, you could see a return on that investment quicker than some of the other methods that we've talked about, some of those other tactics, which might be more of a long-term strategy.
Yes,
is that exactly correct? Yeah.
100%. And also choosing the right platform is ultimately, you don't want to be misled by, again, unfortunately, there are some people who just, some agencies that sell you any random sort of strategy. And again, it's not one size fits all. So ultimately, every single individual or business owner or company needs to understand their audience and get proper guidance and target, because ultimately, obviously, paid per click, you need to put forward some budget in order for ad spend. So, and you don't want to obviously burn your money away. That makes sense. So,
yeah, it's a fine balance, because I think if you get it wrong, you can burn through a lot of money very quickly. But then with pay-per-click, you almost need kind of like a test budget. You've got to give it a certain period of time to test it, to see how it's working and to adjust and optimize the campaigns. Yes. So there is that kind of testing period. But ultimately, like with any of these tactics, I mean, they are all, it's an investment in that you should be getting a return, a measurable return on the investment, whichever of these tactics you decide to go ahead with. And we know whether that's pay-per-click or some of the other things we've mentioned. And if you can't measure that, like you either stop doing it or you change. Like you wouldn't keep throwing money at pay-per-click if it wasn't working for you as a business. But if you get it right, and it's like, well, actually, you know what? We spent, so many £100 or thousands of pounds, but it generated this bigger amount of business, then like, why wouldn't you do it? It's like you give £100 and get £1,000 back. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that?
Of course, exactly. And ultimately, it's also about brand awareness. So even it's not lead generation, even if you have an amazing project which you're really proud of, run a PPC campaign, put 100 quid behind it, and see how it goes. Obviously, targeting is super key rather than shooting wide. Yeah.
Brilliant. That feels like a good place to start to wrap things up, I think, Fabio. So what would be the main thing that you'd like everyone to take away from the conversation?
Okay. So I'm a perfectionist myself. And the one thing I really want to, as we've spoken about a lot of things, the one suggestion I have, or I have two suggestions really, is focusing on the detail is important. Ultimately, this is your brand, your online presence, and you really want to obviously to have a good image. But quicker iterations are always better than a huge sort of build and then so basically fail fast. That is what I'm trying to say. So try different things, obviously, and focus. Because if you try SEO, try PPC, they're a bit of different beasts, and they require their different sort of tactics and also different aspects. So again, more iterations. So what I'm trying to say is, if you're going to build a case studies page, build something simple for now. As in, don't think too big. Let's do it. Just keep it simple. Even if it's just a nice image, a nice line, 2-3 lines about the text, and a nice contact button in order to get in touch to know more, something of the sort. So keep it simple is I think one of my key things. The other aspect is data. So track as much as you can. So if you have an existing website or you're planning on developing, track the data, and always eventually, once you have a few months of data, make changes based on the data. Another project, which is free, use Hotjar. So Hotjar.com is a tool which you can add to your website, and essentially it shows you how users are using your website. Use that data eventually in a few months' time and iterate as needed, because the only person that can actually tell you what's needed on your website is your user and no one else. It's just, sometimes it's a hard pill to swallow, We always think that we know what business needs, but in reality, it's the customer, the user that needs to tell us. Right?
Yeah, that feedback's really important. But yeah, keeping it simple, I think that's such a great approach. I recall the first website that I had, it was so overblown and complicated. I tried to do so much with it and add in so much content when it launched, and it was a bit of a beast, and it really didn't need to be. It would have been better to have had something that was simpler to build upon over time. I think would have been the better approach. Absolutely. Fabio, there is another question I want to ask, and it's nothing to do with our topic. I love to travel and to discover new places. I know you do too. And I was just wondering if you could tell me about one of your favourite places and what you love about it.
Cool. So it's a hard choice, but I would go with Tuscany. Ultimately, again, part of my roots are also Italian, but I love Tuscany. Obviously, the architecture, which is something which I'm sure you guys appreciate a lot. And it just has a blend of so many different things. Again, I love the wine, I love the food, but also the sense of serenity the location brings. So it's a place which at least gives me a lot of inspiration. I love to return as often as possible.
Oh, fantastic. You know what? I've got to say, I think Italy is one of the favourite destinations amongst the podcast guests. It's definitely come up as a favourite destination with a lot of the guests on the show. So there's definitely some synergy there. Fabio, this has been fantastic. So thank you so much for coming along and sharing your expertise with everybody today. Really appreciate it. Where's the best place for people to connect with you online?
Sure. So again, I'm all over LinkedIn. So anytime anyone wants to reach out, anyone needs any advice about what to spoke about, feel free to get in touch on LinkedIn. And again, our website, rootcodex.com. So we're very happy to help out if you have any questions. So.
Awesome. Thanks again, Fabio.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Next time, I'll be chatting about the Chartered Institute of Architectural Technology's annual AT Awards event. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Architecture Business Club. If you liked this episode, think other people might enjoy it, or just want to show your support for the show, then please leave a glowing 5-star review or rating wherever you listen to podcasts. It would mean so much to me and makes it easier for new listeners to discover the show. And if you haven't already done so, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss another episode. If you want to connect with me, you can do that on most social media platforms. Just search for @Mr. John Clayton. The best place to connect with me online, though, is on LinkedIn. You can find a link to my profile in the show notes. Remember, running your architecture business doesn't have to be hard, and you don't need to do it alone. This is Architecture Business Club.